should have, I think she posted it in the Slack channel. So if you want to go there and fork and clone that repo to your own repository, then we can get started with that. But while you're doing that, let me pull up the learning objectives for today. Okay. So like I said, talking about alert controllers, picker views, and timers. Okay. And actually, those are our three main objectives today. So one, being able to use a timer to do something at a specified time in the future. Number two, being able to use a UIPickerView to allow a user to select from a list of items. Okay, and then number three is being able to create and present a UI alert controller. Okay, and let me show you what the app that we're going to be building today is going to look like. Okay, so cool. This is actually starting to look like an app that we'd want to use, right? We've got this timer with a picker. You know, we can do up to, I believe up to 60 minutes is what we have it set for. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and we set like a 5-second timer. I can hit start. I can also hit reset, which will just bring it back to the 5 seconds. If we hit start and let it count down, then when it ends, we'll get this alert controller, which is what the thing that we're going to be talking about today. It says our countdown is over and then has an OK button. Okay, so this is the app for today. Any questions about today's learning objectives or where we're headed today? All good? Cool. All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead then and let's get that starter project. Okay. So I can walk through the process with you here. Okay, yeah. So you should be here, alert controllers, pickers, and timers. Samira did send that starter project, right? You guys have it? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to open up Terminal. And I'm going to navigate to my development folder and then just do get clone. Well, sorry, I guess I should say first, I always forget because I'm part of the Lambda team. So what you guys will need to do is you'll need to fork it, which I've already forked it to my system, which is fine. And then when you get to your repository, you're going to click on this green clone or download. You're going to copy that URL, and then you're just going to do a get. You're going to navigate to your development folder, get clone, and then you have the project, and it should be on your system. Okay, so I'm going to clone this down. Okay, and then let's go ahead and open it. So I'm going to CD into, well, actually, yeah, CD into iOS guided project starter alert controllers, pickers, timers. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead then and open that up. If you don't already have it open, development and my iOS pickers timers starter. Okay, so let me show you what we have in our starter for today. Okay, so we've got our countdown view controller. We've got our countdown.swift file. And on our main storyboard, all of the UI is already set up for us. Okay, so the reason that we've given you a bunch of this stuff is so that we can spend more time like focusing on the actual learning objectives for today. Okay, so these already should have, yeah, we already have all of the outlets and everything set up. So this here is called a UIPickerView. Okay, then we've just got a label, which is what we're going to update, and then we've got a start and a reset button, and both of those buttons are connected to. Do these have their actions? Nope, they don't have the actions connected yet, so we'll need to do that. Okay, so for the most part, we've got our UI set up. Let me just verify. Yeah, so we've got our start button, reset button, countdown picker. So we've got all of our outlets. We just need to set up some of our, well, actually maybe we do have our, I don't know. We'll have to check. Okay, so this is our UI that we're going to be working with today. So let's go ahead and let's open up our countdown view controller in the assistant editor, and let's verify that everything is connected here. Okay, so we can see if I hover over these outlets, I can see that they are all connected to my storyboard, views, right? So I verified all of those outlets are connected, but the IB actions are not connected yet. Okay, you can see that they still have like, they aren't filled in, right? So I need to go ahead and connect those actions. So let's go ahead, and where our start button tapped is, let's click on the little plus icon and drag to the start button. Okay, and then let's do the same for the reset button. Okay, and now all of our UI is connected. Okay, did everyone get those connected okay? All good to go? Sweet. Okay, so let me give you a quick run through of this countdown.swift file that we have here. Okay, because I want to make sure you sort of have a high level view of what this object is actually doing. Okay, so we've got our countdown class. Okay, we've got a countdown state enumeration with 3 different cases. Okay, because a timer can be in any of 3 states. Okay, a timer can be started, finished, or reset. Okay, so any of those 3 states. We also have a countdown delegate here, which is going to inform our view controller, who is the delegate, when the countdown has been updated and when the countdown is finished, right? So that we've got our brain here, our countdown object is our brain, and then we'll have our view controller that needs to know, hey, how are things going with the countdown? Let me know when they're done so I can present this alert, right? Okay, so we've got a delegate property, we've got a duration property, which is the number of seconds that our timer should be set to, okay? We've got a time remaining, which is just doing the calculation of how much time until our timer is over. Okay, we've got a timer property, which we're going to set a stop date, which is just going to be the timer, like what's the current date plus our timer duration is going to be our stop date. Okay, we've got a property for our countdown state, so whether the timer is right, any of these 3, started, finished, or reset. Okay, just our general initializer to initialize our timer and whatnot. We've got this method to start our timer, to reset our timer, to cancel our timer, and then we've got this function here that's going to update our timer. Okay. So again, we give this code to you because we don't expect you to know 100% how everything here is working, right? This may seem a little complex, so that's why we give you a lot of the starter code. But you should have a high-level view of how this countdown object is working. Okay. So any specific questions about anything that you see on this file? Anything that's confusing to you?
Is timer part of the, I guess, blueprint, or is it something that we created in here?
You're talking about this timer right here?
Yes.
Yes. So a timer object, if I command click on it, is part of the foundation framework. So a timer object is just like a built-in Apple API. Yeah, that's a good question though. Yep, so timers are already configured for us, which is nice. It'd be a pain to have to do that ourselves. Okay.
John, are you able to, I guess, edit the timer itself? Because I thought I saw a video where it said that it goes everything, or the timer is set by seconds or something like that. But can you edit the way the timer looks? or countdowns?
Yeah. So the timer is just a class, right? A class for a timer. It's a blueprint, but there are certainly properties about a timer that you can modify to customize it to your own liking. So yeah, timer is just like the general class, like the class name or type name. But yeah, just like with any other class and whatnot, you can set the different properties and attributes of it to customize it to what you need. Yeah, and we'll do a little bit of that today. So, all right, so let's go to our countdown view controller and let me give you a quick glance of what we have in here. Okay, so we have a blueprint here of the things that we're going to need for our countdown object, right? So we've got all of our outlets. We've got this lazy private var called our countdown picker data, which we're going to come back to. I don't want to spend much time on it right now. We've got some actions wired up for our start button and our reset button. We've got a method to show the alert, to update views, and then we've got this function that's going to help us kind of parse a string from our duration, right? Because we're going to be setting our label with the duration that we have. But again, the duration is going to come back to us as a time interval, which is number of seconds. And so we want to be able to format that as like, how many minutes is this? How many hours is this, right? So be able to split it into minutes and seconds. Okay, then we've got our delegate methods. So we add our conformance here, and then countdown did update, countdown did finish. Okay, and then here's everything where we're going to configure our picker view. So to be able to select the number of minutes and the number of seconds. Okay, so this is a roadmap of sort of what we're going to do today. So first off, let's talk about how to present an alert. Okay, so an alert, again, if I hit my start here, after 2 seconds, or yeah, after 5 seconds, we're going to get this alert. Okay, this is what's called a UI alert controller. An alert controller is going to be used all the time because what it does is it presents some action that the user needs to take in order to proceed, right? There's no way to get off of this screen until I select one of the alert actions, is what we call them. Okay, so I only have one alert action here, which is just okay, and that's going to dismiss it. But a lot of times you'll see alerts that require, more, that require you to make like an actual decision of like, oh yes, I want to save my password, or I want to update my password, or I want to delete this photo. So alerts just are used to kind of verify certain things given some user input. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about how to configure an alert controller. Okay, so we're going to go to this show alert here. Okay. So step number 1 to configuring an alert controller is you're going to create an instance of an alert controller. So let's go ahead and say let alert equal UI alert controller. Okay. And we want to select the initializer with the title, message, and the preferred style. Okay. So for the title, let's go ahead and set this to timer finished. Okay, for the message, we're going to set your countdown is over. Okay, and then as far as styles go, there are 2 options for the type of styles that you can have, and I'll show you both of them. So let's go ahead and set this to .alert right now. Okay, so that's step number 1, configure an alert. Okay, step number 2, so let me put these steps here. 1, configure, initialize new instance of alert. Step number 2 is create alert actions, right? So what are all of the possible actions that the user can take with your alert, okay? So let's go ahead and we're going to say let OK action equal UI alert action, okay? And we'll initialize it with a title, a style, and then a handler, okay? The title here we're going to just set to be OK, okay? With style, you have 3 options. Okay, you have cancel, default, and destructive. And this just changes the appearance of what it actually looks like. And so I'll show you the different options after we actually get this running. So let's go ahead and select default for now. And then the handler, if you highlight it and then you press enter, okay, what this is going to give you is it's going to give you trailing closure syntax. Okay, so we're going to talk about closures next unit. But in it, all that you need to know for right now is this is where the code is going to go. Like, if the user selects this action, what do I want to happen? Okay, and that's going to go inside of this closure. Okay, well, we don't actually need our closure here. So let me just go back here. Okay, and so for our handler, I'm just going to remember our handler here is optional. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do nil. And so if I create an action that has a handler of nil, that's just going to dismiss the alert, which is all that we need to happen. Okay. Okay. Step number 3, add action to the alert. Okay. So this is as easy as saying alert.add action, okay action. And then step 4, present alert. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just call self.present. Whoops. Self.present. And we're going to present our alert, animated true, completion nil. Okay, so let's go ahead and call this function inside of our start button tapped method here, or IB action. We'll just call show alert. Okay. What questions do you guys have about alerts? Any questions about any of these steps here?
Would a handler be used for a situation where you were saying, okay, and then it opens up an app or it opens up a screen for you after?
Yeah, exactly. So the handler is just what code do you want to run if the user taps on this action?
Got it, thank you.
Yep. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and let's run it and let's take a look at it. Okay, so we got our timer here. I'm gonna hit the start button and you should see an alert presented, okay? So again, let's sort of translate what we did here, right? So that we can see that the alert title shows big and bold right here, okay? The alert message that we set is just gonna sort of be the subtitle about the alert, gives you more information about what the alert is saying. And then our OK button gives us this OK action, okay? So if I press that, remember our handler is nil, so nothing actually happens, right? Okay, so let me show you again some of the configuration options that we have here. So with alerts, there are 2 styles. There's an alert, and then there's what's called an action sheet, okay? So alerts, they block the UI, they're right in the center, and they require that action before moving forward. An action sheet is a little bit more subtle. So if I hit the start button here, you see that the action sheet pops up from the bottom, right? And so you've got your alert title, your alert message, and then you've got your action. So I mean, here I still have to choose it. I still have to choose something, but again, it's not like as disruptive as like presenting right in the center of the screen. Okay, so this is an action sheet. And that's as easily configurable as just saying preferred style action sheet or preferred style dot alert. Okay.
Johnny, is there one preferred, I guess, alert style to use for, like, trying to gather my words here. Which one would you use it for what situation? Like for this countdown, I would assume the alert is the preferred method. Mm-hmm. Versus the style sheet.
Yeah.
Is dictate different situations dictate? Is that right?
Yeah, so a lot of it will really depend. I guess maybe a good way of thinking about it is an alert is sort of like, hey, something's finished or done, or hey, like an action is required. So it sort of presents as an alert and it's like right there, big and bold. And action sheets are used more for like confirmation type stuff. So like if you're going and like deleting a photo from your photo library, we'd present an action sheet that's like, are you sure you want to delete? And then we'd have like sort of that confirmation of like, okay, you hit delete once, like, are you sure? And then they hit delete again kind of thing. So that's probably the best way that I can think of to distinguish them. Is one is like something's done, or we need to alert you of this thing that like you need to take an action quickly, whereas an action sheet is sort of like kind of a confirmation, or hey, here are a list of things that you can do with this. What do you want to do? So it's less disruptive, I guess. Does that make sense? Sorry, maybe that's not a good explanation.
No, that makes total sense.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Okay, and then for our alert actions, okay, there's no limit to the number of actions you can add to an alert, right? But for alert actions, one thing that you can change here is the style, okay? So let me just show you. I'm going to create just a couple of actions so you can see the difference here. Okay, so I'm going to say like let cancel action and let delete action. I'll just update these to say delete and cancel. Okay, and then I'm going to change the style because we have three styles. We have default, we have cancel, and then we have one that is called destructive. Okay, and I'll show you what that does in a second. Okay, so I'll add all of my actions here: alert, add action, cancel, alert dot add action, delete action. There we go. Okay, so I hit my start button. Okay, so these are the three different styles. Okay, so a default is just blue text, not bolded or anything. Okay, destructive action is red. Okay, and so you usually want to indicate that if the user takes this action, there's going to be something destructive happening, or in this case, like we're going to delete something. Okay, so that's a destructive action. Okay, and then the cancel is just sort of big and bold, and it's usually bold that it's sort of like this is the safe option, right? Like if you cancel, like nothing's going to happen, right? And so it's your eyes are kind of drawn towards that, whereas the destructive, you're like, oh, I don't want to press the red button, sort of thing, right? So these are just kind of different UI types that give users specific visual cues of how your action is going to like affect, or how tapping that action is going to affect whatever they're doing, okay? So again, we just need to have our OK action, so I'm going to get rid of these. But I did want to demonstrate kind of the difference between those different styles. Okay. Any other questions about alerts?
I'm having issues with, I have a error. It won't let me run. I compile it won't let me build. It says build failed. So I'm not sure what's going on. I did exactly what you did.
Yeah. Is anybody else having issues building it? Okay. Yeah, let's take a quick look, Aaron, just to make sure that you're not going to fall behind.
All right, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So
Okay.
yeah, it says.
Yeah, so what you need to do is, it's because you're trying to build it on, instead of building on a simulator, you're trying to build it on your actual device. So usually if you're trying to build to an actual device, you have to register it with like your developer, with your like team name or team account. So I can show you how to fix that if you want to run it on your iPad, or if you're just fine to run it on the simulator, then that's cool too.
Oh, I'm fine with the simulator. I didn't even know it was on the iPad.
Yeah, let's try running it now. let's see, just give it a sec. Yeah, just hit cancel. Just give it a second to build. Looks like it's still compiling. Yeah, you're good now.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep.
All right, I do have a question. So when you were creating all of those actions, they were stacked upon one another. But so is there a way to do it like right next to each other? Are there different types of action for it?
So whether they're like vertically stacked versus horizontally stacked?
Yeah.
So what you're saying? So an alert, a UI alert will only be horizontally stacked if you have 2 actions. If you have any more than 2 actions, then it's going to stack vertically. And that's just because by nature of like the iPhone screen, right? The iPhone screen's not very wide. And so anytime you get more than 2 actions, they're going to start stacking vertically. But yeah, if you just have 2, they'll put them side by side horizontally.
Okay.
But yeah, unfortunately, that's not something you can really change or configure.
Okay.
That's just sort of the default behavior for it. So,
Johnny, there's no way to change like the style background. Like, say you wanted to do like, I guess, a see-through background, so it's not popping out so much. I guess like just change up the style instead of having like that white background. Is there a way to do that?
I mean, yeah, you can update like tints and background colors and whatnot, but for the most part, alerts, like when you configure an alert controller, it's like the things that you can and should change about it are pretty minimal because people are like really used to this like UI, and so if you like are presenting something that's foreign to them, then it can be sort of confusing or jarring. Versus like if you have like a standard presentation of alerts and action sheets, users are very familiar with that type of UI. So I would shy away from like customizing it too much and just let like the default behavior be a default. Because again, this isn't some like big foundational, like fundamental aspect of your app, right? This is just for like quick actions, right? So it's fine to just use sort of the standard behavior and system behavior.
Johnny, is an alert the same thing as a notification, or like do you change the preferred style to like dot notification or?
They're completely different APIs. So yeah. All right, cool. So let's pretend, let's check this off the list. You should be able to create and present a UI alert controller. Done, okay? That's it, it's just those 4 steps. That's all you need to do to set up an alert. Okay, let's go back to Xcode here.
Do we need to, like if we were making the storyboard from scratch, would we drag in a UI alert controller first on the storyboard? Or
No,
is that not? Okay.
no, it's just all configured programmatically. Yeah, and because really it's easy, right? Like you give it a title, a message, you give it some actions, but yeah, you can't configure those on the storyboard.
Okay.
All right, cool. So let's talk about timers then, okay? So let me show you the documentation for a timer here. Okay, so again, we have a class for a timer that fires after a certain time interval has elapsed, sending a specified message to a target object, okay? So again, timers work in conjunction with run loops, blah, blah, blah. That's probably stuff you don't really need to worry about, but we've got a bunch of information about timers and setting up timers, okay? Now the one that we're gonna use, so here's some documentation on how to actually schedule a timer. Okay, as we've got the use this method to create a timer and schedule it on the current run loop in the default mode. Okay, so right here, schedule timer creates a new timer and schedules it on the current run loop in default mode. Anyway, there's a bunch of stuff you can do with timers. Okay, so we've got all of the different ways of actually creating a timer. Okay, so what we're going to do then is let's go to our start button tapped, and let's get rid of the show alert for now. Okay. Here's how we create a timer. Let timer equal timer dot scheduled timer, and we're going to use the one that has the with time interval, repeats, and then the block. Okay. So time interval is how long is this timer? What's the duration for the timer? Let's go ahead and set it for 2 seconds. Repeats, we're going to set to false because it's not a repeating timer. Okay. And then for our block here, what we want to do is we're saying what block of code do we want to run? Okay, so actually just leave that with the little stub there. And let's create a private function here called timer finished. Okay, and this is going to take in a timer parameter. Okay, and then we're going to call show alert. Okay, so the block of code that we want to run when our timer is through is going to be our timer finished. Okay, so we can go ahead and for the block we'll put timer finished. Okay, and again with these kind of things, whenever you are putting in a method for a specific block, you can't actually pass in anything into the arguments, right? Like I can't put in here, oh, pass in timer, right? So really what it does and what the compiler infers is saying, hey, this is a timer object, and your method that you're calling takes in a timer. It can infer that like you want to be passing that timer into your timer finished method. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. Okay. 1, 1000, 2, 1000, timer finished. Okay. You'll notice we haven't done anything to like connect the UI up to our timer, right? But all of that was like happening in the background behind the scenes of we hit the start button, 2 seconds passed, and then we present our alert. Okay. So that's the basic way of creating a timer. This warning that we're getting here is saying, hey, like you created a timer, but you're not actually doing anything with it. Like you just want to replace, you know, your property name with an underscore because we're not like actually doing anything with the assignment. But it doesn't really matter because we're going to get rid of this. But do we have any questions here?
I had a question about, you might have went over it in a previous class, but when you put an underscore before a property, what does that mean again?
You put an underscore before a property?
Yeah, you just mentioned. Yeah, just like that.
Yeah, so you can, so what this is suggesting is it's saying like replace timer with just an underscore. But like putting an underscore before a property is just a way of like distinguishing, like it's just another way that you can name a property. And it gets a lot deeper, but a lot of times, actually, no, I'm not going to talk about that. Just for now, you can use an underscore to like prefix the name of a property. But at least for your purposes right now, you should never have to do that.
Thank you.
In the with time interval, is that always in seconds? Or is there a way to, it does default to seconds? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always in seconds. So yeah, you can either do the math like right in here. You could do like 60 times 24 if you wanted to. But yeah, it does always need to, it's always going to be seconds.
What if it's days? Like,
yeah.
I don't know, what if time till anniversary?
Right, yeah, so I mean, so, you know, obviously there are ways that you could like kind of put this into a function or whatnot to calculate the number of days or whatnot. But yeah, a time interval is always going to be in the amount of seconds. So if you wanted to do a couple of days, right, you would have to do like, you know, 60 times 24 times 7, right? And that would be a 7-day timer. But yeah, it always does need to be passed in as number of seconds.
Got it.
Okay, cool. So we're not actually going to use this, so you can get rid of it. Because in our countdown.swift file, we have our start function here, okay, that's using that same thing. So timer.scheduleTimer with time interval, okay, and we're actually setting it to 0.03. So we're firing the timer every 3/10 of a second, or not, no, sorry, 3/100ths of a second, okay? But we have it set to repeat equals true, okay? And the reason that we're doing this is because we want to have on our app that we have working here, right? See how this is updating like, and that's why we're setting our timer to fire every 3/100ths of a second so that we can update that label every single time. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, do that until this specific time, okay? And so that's what this countdown object is going to do for us. But we are creating that timer object here with it. And then the block that we're running each time is our update timer, which checks, do we have a stop date, okay? Take the current time. If the current time is less than our stop date, then our timer is still active, and keep going. Update the timer, okay? Otherwise, our timer is finished, so we set our state to finished. We call cancel timer, set our stop date equal to 0, and then call our delegate countdown did finish, okay? Okay, so back into our countdown view controller. We want to create a property. Okay, so let's go up to our properties marker. And let's create a private let countdown equal countdown. Okay, so we've got our countdown object. Okay, so in viewed load here, let's go ahead and we're going to set countdown dot duration is equal to 5. Okay. So our countdown duration is equal to 5. Okay, if I go to countdown here, I can see that we have our duration property, right? So the countdown starting value. So I'm just setting the countdown starting value to 5 seconds. Okay, and then back in my countdown view controller, inside of that IB action where we have start button tapped, we're just going to call countdown dot start. Okay, so remember our countdown is sort of the brain that's actually acting as the thing that's doing all of the time math and updating and whatnot. And as the view controller, we want to be able to update according to what's going on with the countdown, right? So when the countdown is updated, when the countdown finishes. So in order for us to sort of register to receive those updates, what do I need to do with my view controller? What have we been doing in the class so far? If we have 2 separate objects and one is sort of the brain and the other needs to update the UI accordingly, what do we generally do?
Call the delegate.
Delegating.
Yeah, so we set the view controller as the delegate for the countdown object, okay? So inside of viewed load here, let's go ahead and let's set countdown.delegate is equal to self. Okay, as soon as my view loads up, I'm setting myself or the view controller as the delegate for the countdown object. Yeah. So we've set ourselves as the delegates, and then in the starter code, we've actually already conformed. We've already conformed to the delegate. So let's go down to, I think for me at least, it's line 83, countdown view controller, and then conformance to our countdown delegate. And then we have our two methods. So countdown did update and countdown did finish. Okay. So let's go ahead, and when the countdown is finished, we're going to call self.showAlert. Okay. But again, all of this is still just going to we haven't connected any of our UI to actually update, right? So right now I could run the timer, and then after 5 seconds, it would present the alert. But we've already shown you that that works, right? That a timer in the background starts, and then we present our alert. Let's actually get our UI to start updating for us so that we can see the timer in action, okay? So let's go to our update views method here, okay? This is where we're going to actually update our time labels text with the time that we have remaining on our timer, okay? So in update views, let's go ahead and we're going to say time label dot text is equal to the string value of my countdown dot time remaining, okay? Because time remaining is a time interval. And so I need to get the string value of that so that I can update my label accordingly. Okay, so with update views set up now, in countdown did finish, let's go ahead and call update views. And then let's do the same thing in countdown did update. I'm just going to call update views, right? So that we can be informed of like what's the time remaining on the timer at every 300ths of a second. We're going to be informed, hey, what's the current time? What's the current time? What's the current time? What's the current time? So that we can update our label accordingly. Okay, and then before we test it, let's we're going to update this a little bit more, this update views, right, to make it a little bit smarter. Okay, so first off, let's say that if the timer, we're going to set our start button dot is enabled equal to true. Okay. And then we're going to handle our different cases. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to write a switch statement on our countdown dot state. Okay, and we have 3 cases. In the case where our timer is started, let's go ahead, and then this is where we're going to set our time label dot text is equal to the string value of our countdown dot time remaining. I spelled string right. String. Okay, so we don't actually need this line that you could have just put this line that we had up above, but I rewrote it, so. Okay, so in the case where our timer is started, we want to update with the current timer, okay? In the case where our timer is finished, let's go ahead and set the time label dot text equal to the string value of 0, right? Because our timer is over, it's up. Okay, and then in the case where it's reset, let's go ahead and update our time label dot text equal to the string value of our countdown dot duration. Okay, and then because those are my only 3 cases, I don't need the default case. Okay, and now we are ready to run it. Once you have this code, go ahead and raise your hand. Make sure I don't leave here too soon. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and run it. It's not going to look very pretty at this point. There's still a lot we need to do. But I'm going to hit start, and we should see it count down from 5 seconds to 0 and show our alert. Okay, the UI is like really funky right now. That's okay. But this is giving a visual of like what that countdown object is actually doing, right? We can see that this timer label is updating a ton, right? It's updating every 300ths of a second, right? Which is really fast. So again, you see this counting down. Still looks kind of funky, but that's okay. Okay, so if yours is working and it's presenting the alert properly, let's have you lower your zoom hands and then re-raise them.
Can you show me the start button tapped again?
Yes, let's see. It's up here.
Hey Johnny, in the code when I'm like, because I'm trying to like put two and two together to kind of follow along with what the app is doing versus what the code is telling me. So on the section where it says countdown duration 5 seconds, that's our input that we're putting, that the code is counting down from, correct? And is the calculation of how it's counting down, is that the one above it where it says countdown picker data? Is that where it's like, I guess, using?
No, we'll come back to this.
Oh, okay.
That's going to be for setting up our picker. So the countdown duration is, so if I look at my countdown object here, we see that my duration property is just the countdown starting value. So I'm just setting the countdown starting value. And then when we tap our start button, I'm calling countdown.start, right? So if I go to what start means is we cancel the timer before starting a new timer. Then I'm creating a new timer with the stop date 5 seconds, like adding my duration to the stop date, okay? So it's saying take the date now, add this duration, and that's my stop time. Okay, so the countdown object itself, as soon as I call start, it's going to take whatever we set as that initial duration, and then it's going to count until that time.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just out of curiosity, if you're setting your time interval at hundredths of a second, why is it showing so many significant figures? Presumably something we could change in the presentation, but I'm just wondering why it defaults to so many.
Yeah, so I mean, so we can play with this, right? We could play with this time interval. Let's set this to like 0.1. Rerun it. Hit start here, right? And so it's still showing us like the same number of decimal points, and that's just because that's like what the floating point value is at that moment in time. But like it doesn't really matter what it says right now because we're gonna end up formatting that number. That's just the value of that interval at that specific period that we're hitting the fire date.
Okay, understood.
Okay, so let's make some UI fixes to actually get this to look decent. Okay, so let's go to view did load in our countdown view controller. Okay, and the first change that we're going to make is we're going to use a fixed width font so that numbers don't like pop, for lack of a better term, and update UI to show duration. Okay, because every number has a specific intrinsic width, right? Like the number 1 has a lower width than like the number 6, right? And that's just like by nature of like what the number actually is, right? And so what we want to do is what we're seeing at the moment, if I rerun this, okay, so we see that my label is sort of like bouncing a little bit, right? And that's because the width of all of those characters is like changing with how much we're updating it, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to use a monospaced font so that we're sort of setting like the intrinsic width of all of the numbers to be the same, right? So even though a 1 is technically thinner, we're going to give it enough space to change to whatever number it needs to be without changing like the actual width or size, okay? So let's go ahead and we're going to set time label dot font is equal to UI font dot monospaced digit system font of size time label dot font dot point size. Okay, we'll set the weight to be dot medium. Okay, and then in view did load, let's also call update views. Okay, but our date duration is still just that normal time interval, right? So it counts down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is fine, but not really like visually appealing when we're thinking of timers, right? So we want to see it in like number of seconds and milliseconds and whatnot, okay? So the way that we can take a number and sort of format it as a date is by using what's called a date formatter object, okay? So let's go up here and let's put this above our countdown picker data. We're going to create a date formatter, okay? So variable date formatter of type date formatter equals, and then we're going to create this closure, so this opening and closing brace, which is just saying, hey, like I'm about to configure a date formatter, okay, and then open and closing braces, which just creates an instance, right? Okay, so inside of this body here, we're going to say let formatter equal date formatter. Okay, and now that I've got a formatter, I can set my formatter's date format. Okay, what is the format that I want? Well, I want this to be hours, hours, minute, minute, second, second, and millisecond, millisecond. Okay, so that's the date format that I want, right? So I have that customization of how do I actually want to format this. Okay, I also want to set the formatter's time zone. Okay, we're going to say is equal to time zone dot init, or let's see here, time zone init, and let's do the seconds from GMT. Okay, so this returns a time zone initialized with a specific number of seconds from GMT. Okay, and we're going to say 0. Okay, then our last line, return formatter. Okay, so again, our formatter object, it allows us to sort of pass in a time interval and then to sort of calculate from that time interval this date format of hours, hours, minute, minute, second, second, and then millisecond, millisecond, right? So we're just giving it a general structure of what the format of that string should look like. And then also setting the time zone to be 0 seconds from GMT, okay? I won't get too much into dates. You mostly need to know that dates, like working with dates as a programmer is not easy. Because if you think about it, like every user that you have is in a different time zone, right? And so like if you think of like, if you're creating, you have like a calendar app and you do a calendar invite and say, hey, the meeting today is at 10 o'clock, okay? Well, who's 10 o'clock? My 10 o'clock, your 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock GMT time, right? And so this conversion of dates is really complex when working with applications. And so generally, when we create date objects, the value of that date object is going to be in the GMT time zone, okay? So the GMT is sort of the standard sort of time zone that we look at as developers, and then we say, you know, I am 7 hours ahead of GMT or 6 hours behind GMT, but we sort of are relating it to the central point that we all share. And so that's why I'm setting the time zone for my formatter to be 0 seconds from GMT, just sort of as like a central, like this timer object is going to be formatted related to GMT time zone. But again, I don't want to get too much into that because it's not one of our learning objectives, and it's something that I'm still learning and trying to get better at every day. So, okay. So formatter object though, it's really cool because it takes an ugly string and it makes it look good and actually readable, okay? So let's go ahead and let's go to our method down here. Okay, so mine's on line 98, but we're gonna get this string from duration, okay? Let's go ahead and update this, okay? So let's create a date. We're going to say let date equal date, and then we're going to use the time interval since, or time interval since reference date. Okay, so this creates a date value initialized relative to 0000 UTC time on January 1st, 2001 by a given number of seconds. Okay. So again, we're trying to look at like a central point of time and like how many seconds has it been since January 1st, 2001, GMT time. I don't know why they picked that date, but whatever. Okay, and here's where we're gonna pass in our duration. Okay. And so then in our return here, instead of returning an empty string, let's return date formatter dot string from date. And we're going to pass in our date here. So everybody like cringe a little bit when they hear somebody cough? I know I do. I'm like, whoa, hey man. We're just on Zoom though, so you guys are safe. Okay. All right, so we got this method here that takes in a duration and outputs a string, and it's gonna use our date formatter to turn a specific time interval into a nicely prettily formatted string, okay? So now inside of our update views, let's update each of these to use our string from duration, okay? So I'm gonna get rid of this right here, and instead we're gonna call string from, and we're gonna pass in our countdown.time remaining. Okay, here, we're gonna do string from 0. And then here, we're gonna do string from countdown.duration. Okay, now we're ready to run. Let's go ahead and play. Okay, now we see, look, we see our 5-second duration set. It's formatted as we've got our hour, hour, minute, minute, second, second, millisecond, millisecond, right? Okay, if we hit start, we see that it's not bouncing or jittery, right? Because we're using that fixed font size. Okay, and then we actually see that it's counting down in the number of seconds. Okay, so if yours is working like this and looking good, let's go ahead and have you raise your hand.
I actually have an issue. It starts from 0, 0 for some reason.
Your timer does?
Yeah.
In viewed load, are you calling update views? So up in viewed load right here.
Yeah.
And then, okay, I'm gonna send you guys on break and then we can take a look at yours. Okay, is there anything, any questions before we go on break? About anything that
Johnny?
we've done before? Yeah.
I'm sorry, just for the formatter date format, is that us making the format? It's not the last thing that we did towards the bottom, right? Like that's actually us constructing that format of time, correct? Not that very last one where it said UT, I think.
UTC?
UTC, yes. Is it that one that's constructing it, or is it us constructing it
No,
versus
right here where we set the date format, we're constructing what the date should look like.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the reference date that we're calling down here, that's just like sort of setting the date, like the time. It's really confusing, but like it's just sort of this way that we initialize. We get the initial date for like our time with our duration, and then we set what the string looks like for that actual date, which is 5 seconds ahead of time, right? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and let's take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we've got a few more UI updates, but we're gonna work on our picker now so that we can actually configure like our timer to be, whatever amount of time we want to set instead of just 5 seconds. So, okay. All right, Bowden, do you want to share your screen with me and show me what's going on? Okay, and what happens when you hit start? Oh, nothing happens when you hit start. Okay, let's take a look at it. So let's go to let me look at viewed load really quick. Okay, and go ahead and put your code in line 46. Put that after the code in line 48. We'll wait to set our duration until after we set ourselves as the delegate. Okay, and then yeah, you're calling update views, which is good. Start button tapped. We're calling countdown.start. Okay, scroll down for me.
Hey, Johnny, right there on monospace, it's supposed to be digital.
Oh, yeah, go up real quick. Sorry, I must have missed that. Scroll up for me, back up to view did load. Yeah, and that, you want to change that to be, what's the exact name for it? Monospaced digit system font. So in between monospaced and system, just put digit system font. And then, yeah. Okay. All right, let's just check a few more things. If you want to scroll down for me. Let's see, it looks like your build actually failed. Can you see where it's failing? If you click on the red exclamation point. What the heck? That shouldn't be an issue. It's like, I don't know what that's stemming from.
Sometimes you have to fix that just by restarting Xcode.
Yeah. But yeah, it looks like it's working now. Okay. All right, so let's go back to your code. It looks like we're still having some issues. So scroll up to your date formatter for me real quick. Scroll to the top. Okay, we've got our formatter, time zone, which is good. Okay, perfect. All right, now scroll back down. And let's go update views. Okay, that looks right. Okay, scroll down for me again. Date formatter string from date. That's weird. I do not see. Oh, delete line 161. Or sorry, 101. 101. Sorry, it was small text. We don't need that anymore because we're doing all of that. We're setting all of that in the switch statement. Sheesh. Yeah, so go ahead and hit the stop button in Xcode to stop like the current session and then hit run again. Sweet. Cool. Yeah, I'm not sure why your labels, because we haven't done anything in the storyboard. It looks like your label got some weird constraint, but we can fix that after. It's not a big deal for now. Okay, cool. Let me bring the screen share back and then everybody else come back. Break is over. Okay. All right, so just a few things and then we'll get into our UI picker view. Okay. So let's make sure that our reset button works here. Okay. So when we reset the timer, what we want to do is we want to call countdown.reset. And then we'll go ahead and update views. Okay, so that should allow us to start, hit the reset button. The timer goes back to the original duration that we set. Okay, so start, reset, start, reset, start, reset. Okay. So next we're going to be talking about picker views. Okay. So if you look on the main.storyboard, you see that we have a picker view. Okay. And the default appearance of a picker view when in storyboards is of a bunch of cities in California, right? So Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Cupertino, Santa Clara. A picker view is not configurable in storyboards, just like a table view is not configurable in storyboards. We can set up prototype cells, but we need to configure everything with a picker view in code, okay? So we've created an outlet for our picker view, but now we actually have to do all of the code and stuff to configure a picker view, okay? And configuring a picker view and configuring a table view are not all that different, right? Because if you think of a picker view, it's sort of like a multi-column table view, right? That you can scroll on and it goes through a list of different things. Okay, so a lot of the methods are gonna sound pretty similar, okay, when it comes to setting up a picker view. But, so a UIPickerView, just like a UI table view, has a protocol called UIPickerView data source, and then also UIPickerView delegate, okay? So we have data source and delegate methods like a table view where we configure our picker view, okay? So number one, the first data source method that we must configure is number of components, okay? Number of components is how many columns does your picker have, right? So if we're selecting, minutes and selecting seconds, right, then we're gonna have 2 components, right? But in our case, if we look at the finish timer here, okay, this is actually going to have 4 components, right? Because minutes and seconds, even though those aren't changeable, we do still need to configure for those, right? So this could be for our 4 different components, okay? But I'll show you how to make this more dynamic, but that's what number of components is how many columns or how many different picker columns do we have, okay? The second data source method that you must update is number of rows in component. Okay, so how many rows should each component have? Well, in the case of our minutes, we want to do up to 59 minutes, right? So we would want to say that component 1 has 59, component 2 has 1, component 3 has 60, component 4 has 1, right? So we're going to want to make that dynamic as well. But that's how we configure how many components and then how many rows are in each component, okay? So we've got our data source and our delegate, okay? For these methods to be called, right, I'm going to need to set myself as the delegate for the picker views, data source and delegate, okay? So let's go back up to our view did load here, okay? And before you do any of this countdown duration or delegate, right, let's go ahead and set ourselves as the data source and the delegate for the countdown picker. Okay, so countdown picker dot data source equals self, and countdown picker dot delegate is equal to self. Okay, so you want these 2 lines. Let's go back down to our data source methods. And just for fun, in this first one, let's go ahead and return 1. And for number of rows, let's return 5. Okay. So as far as the UIPickerView delegate goes, there is one method that we need to implement. It's going to be title for row. Okay, so instead of self for row at, it's title for row at. And for now, let's just go ahead and return minutes. Okay, then I'm going to run this. Okay, so I see I have one component, 5 rows, and each of them says minute. Okay, if your initial picker here is working, go ahead and raise your hand.
Can you move the simulator over just to the right a little bit?
Yeah, let's see.
Hey, Johnny, what did you put on the, I believe it's the counter picker? There was a data source, but I missed the second one. It was a delegate?
Yeah, yep,
And what did we equal that to? Was it
self.
self? Okay.
Yeah, so we set ourselves as the data source and the delegate for our countdown picker.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so obviously this picker is not very useful, right? But you can see how these methods are actually working, right? So number of components is how many columns, number of rows is how many in each column, how many rows in each column, and then title for row is what does each item say, right? But obviously this isn't useful, right? But what we have is we've created, if you scroll back up to your countdown picker data, okay, so mine's on line 31, so at least just right underneath our date formatter, you can see that we've actually created a variable for our countdown picker data, okay? So what we've done is this is going to be an array of arrays, okay, an array of arrays. So what we're gonna have is we're gonna have an array of strings, okay? So we're gonna have a minutes array, which is just going to be an array that has the numbers 0 through 60 mapped into like the string values of themselves, okay? And then seconds, we're gonna have 0 to 59 mapped to the string values of themselves, okay? And then you can see here that we're creating this data array of strings that we're gonna have that minutes array. We're gonna have an array that just has min in it. We're gonna have our seconds array, and then an array that just has the string SEC in it. Okay, and then we're returning that as our data. Okay, does that make sense what this is doing? What this looks like? All right, so this is gonna be something like, right, 0 to 60, right, because that's what we set for our minutes. And then seconds here is going to be seconds.
I'm sorry, I have a question about what's going on with that mapping thing.
Yeah, so a map is just like a high-level function of take all of these values and go through each of them one by one and give me back the string value of that value. So it's almost like, it's like a high-level function for like a for loop. It's just, imagine we're writing like for a number in 0 to 60, return the string value of number. So we're just sort of like mapping like numerical value, like integer values into the string values of themselves. But yeah, we'll go more into these high level functions in unit 2. That's why we gave you this function as part of the starter code.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I know I'm saying that a lot. Like, oh, you don't actually need to know this, but yeah, these are just like some higher level functions. But yeah, it's the equivalent of doing like a for for a number in array, you know, return string value of number. And so just go through each of those values in the array and give me the string value of it. Okay. All right, so we've got our data source, which is all that we're gonna need to configure our picker, okay? So let's go back down here. Okay, so for our number of components, I know that we're gonna want 4, but let's make it dynamic. And we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna say countdown picker data dot count. All right, so how many different arrays do we have in my countdown picker data? We've got 4, right? We've got one for our minute, or for our minutes, and then the minute label, and then seconds, and then the second label. Okay, so how many rows do we want in each component? Okay, well, we're gonna take, so we don't have an index path here, right? Because index paths are reserved for like collection views and table views, but we do have a component, right? So I can use that to subscript syntax my array. So what we want to do is we want to return countdown picker data at my component dot count, right? So if I have 60 items in component 0, then I want to return 60 rows. If I've got 1 item in component 1, then I want to return 1. If I've got 59 items in component 2, then I want to return 59, right? So we want that to be dynamic according to how many rows are in each of my arrays in my countdown picker data object. Okay, so now in title for row, let's go ahead and we're gonna say let time value equal countdown picker data at my component at my row. Okay, so remember we have an array of arrays. Okay, so to get into like the deepest level of getting a singular value out of that array, I have to subscript syntax twice. Okay, so the component and then the row. And then let's go ahead and let's return the string value of my time value. Okay, so let's run it real quick. Okay, you should see now that you've got 4 columns. You can go 0 to 60 minutes and 0 to 59 seconds. Okay, any questions about how we're configuring our picker?
Johnny, are you limited as far as how far that array, say 0 to 60 is? Can you just go infinite?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, just like a table view, you can go to infinity if you wanted to, right?
So to, like, if we wanted just this to have like a single view, I'm kind of looking at like a different way to use a picker. We would just need to like set an array. Is there a way that in the app to set it to where we can add to that picker?
Yeah, so it's just taking the value of an array, right? And so if you like create a new object, you would just need to append that value to the array, and then your picker is always going to be looking at what items does it have in its array at that current time.
So like the other stuff that we've done in the previous projects and stuff like that, we could use that kind of that same way, I guess, when we were throwing things in array, like a reading list and our movie list and stuff like that. We could actually use that to put it in a picker view.
Sure.
And we could is there a way we can change the size of that picker and just leave it, or is it just it always needs to be that big?
So you can do some configuring with the size, which I'll show you how you can like configure the individual components, but you can also like the picker view is just in storyboards, right? So you can give it some constraints of height and width and whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you guys will find that arrays are super powerful. Like being able to interact with arrays and like insert and index them and find like the first index of a value inside of an array, like they are awesome being able to work with arrays. So you'll get really comfortable with them.
And this may be like off topic, but is there a way to alphabetize an array? Like it would automatically alphabetize, or no?
Okay, can you ask that one more time? Sorry, my internet cut out for just a sec.
So in arrays, is there a way you can alphabetize the arrays and the components in the arrays or the objects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's going to use another one of those high-level functions, just like we have map up here.
Right.
So there's one that's called sorted, and you can sort it like alphabetically and whatnot. But that will be in Unit 2. We'll talk more about those.
But we can do that like here, like what you have in your countdown picker data. You would do it right there where the map is at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can sort it there. You wouldn't do it specifically this way because this is not a computed property. This is a stored property. So every time we call countdown picker data, we're not rerunning the calculations here. It's just as soon as we like ran the project, this was initialized and given like a specific value. So right now it's not really configured to be able to add to it or remove from it. But yeah, if I made it a computed property, then it would be something that could be more dynamic if it was something that I was trying to add or remove things from.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead then. And there are a couple of other delegate methods that I want to implement here. So after title for row at. So there's one that's called width for component. So that's the easiest way. It's harder to like search. If you go to PickerView, you can see the different delegate methods, but I like to just search for it by like one of its parameter names, which is just going to be width for component. Okay. And let's go ahead and let's give each component a width of 50. Okay. But what we want to do now is we're going to update, we're going to have another function that's did select. Okay, did select row at. Okay. Or not row at, but did select row and then the row number. Because whatever I select my row, whatever I select in my row, I want to update my timer label, right? So if I select 59 minutes, I want my label to be updated with 59 minutes, okay? So that's where we're gonna implement this. But what I need to do is we're gonna need to create a computed property, okay? That will give me back duration, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's scroll back up to the top. And let's just put this after our date formatter. We're going to create a private variable called duration. Okay, and it's going to be of type time interval. And then we'll give it opening and closing braces. Okay, so notice the difference here. Computed property, opening and closing braces, no parentheses. Okay, stored property, opening and closing braces, but it has parentheses. The key difference here is a computed property is called every single time. Like a computed property is computed every time the property is called, okay? So every time I call duration, it's gonna run this specific calculation. Okay, a stored property, even though it looks like a computed property, is only calculated once upon initialization, okay? So if I call countdown picker data, it's gonna be the same now as it was 5 minutes ago, right? It's not It's not going to recalculate itself every time I try calling it. Okay.
Johnny, is that
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that data inside the, say for example, the countdown picker? Is that data always constant, or because it's not computed? So we're assuming we already know what we're going to be pulling from there, right? Almost like pulling from a box.
So it's not computed in the sense that it's not computed every time you call the getter, right? Every time I try to access it, it is computed upon initialization. So this is all computed when we load up the app for the first time, but then it's constant thereafter. So it's only computed once. A computed property is computed every time you call it.
So that's more a response time and memory use efficiency thing then, I take it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so a lot of times, like with date formatters, you'll make it a stored property instead of a computed property because date formatters are pretty expensive memory-wise. I mean, that's all relative, right? But generally, you don't want to just keep creating date formatters. And so here we're just creating a single date formatter and storing that value once. Okay, so in our duration computed property, what we want to do is we want to convert from minutes plus seconds to total seconds, right? So we want to parse the input from the picker into like an actual time interval, okay? So let's go ahead and we're going to say let minute string equal countdown picker dot selected row in component 0, okay? Because remember, component 0 has our minutes, okay? Let second string equal countdown picker dot selected row in component 2, which is our seconds component, okay? Well, we've got those, so let's say let minutes equal the integer value of our minute string. Let seconds equal the integer value of our second string. Okay, and then total seconds is going to be equal to the time interval, and then we're going to do minutes times 60 plus seconds. To give us our total time interval, we're going to return total seconds. Seconds here. Okay, so again, I want duration to be a computed property because it's going to be something that's changeable, right? Every single time I select a new value on my picker, I want to update my duration.
Are we having to multiply minutes by 60 because minutes are still technically calculated in seconds?
Yeah, so a time interval always has to return the number of seconds, right? But remember, our minute picker is going to be in minutes. And so to get the seconds equivalent, you have to times that by 60.
Right, okay.
Okay. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's go back down to our did select row at. Okay. So inside of did select row at, let's go ahead and we're going to set countdown dot duration is going to be equal to our calculated duration. Okay, which again is just pulling from that picker view and calculating how many seconds that is. Okay, and then we'll also go ahead and call update views so that we update our label accordingly. Okay, so if we scroll back up, let's go ahead and in view did load, we don't want to set the countdown duration to 5 anymore, right? Because we're going to want it to be based on what our picker is. Okay, but after we set ourselves as the data source and delegate, let's go ahead and set a default duration to 1 minute, 30 seconds. Okay, so here we're going to call countdown picker dot select row. We're going to select row 1 in component 0, animated false. Okay, so that's going to select 1 minute, and then we're going to do countdown picker dot select row in component 2, or sorry, select row 30 in component 2, animated false. Okay, and then just for UI sake, after view did load here, let's go ahead and let's make our buttons be rounded. Instead of like the hard 90-degree corners, we'll do rounded. So the way that we can do that is we can say start button dot layer dot corner radius is equal to 4. Okay, let's do the same thing for the reset button. Reset button dot layer dot corner radius equals 4. Okay, then we're ready to run. Let's see. Sorry, and let's actually call countdown duration equals duration here as well. That way when it loads up, we'll see the minute 30 seconds here. Okay, so what you should see at this point is you can update your picker and it should update your label accordingly, okay? So 18 minutes, 16 minutes, can go up to 60 minutes, which then goes up to 1 hour, right? Ups it to an hour. Okay, so you should see that that works. You should see that this updates your number of seconds. Okay, but most importantly, you should see that you can set this. So I'll set this to 10 seconds. You can hit start, counts down from 10. And as soon as it hits 0, it should present our alert that our timer is finished. Okay, and then I can hit reset and that will go back to 10 seconds. Okay, so if your timer is working, let's go ahead and have you raise your hand.
Can you show me the code you have at the very bottom real quick? I didn't quite catch the last of that.
Yeah, right here.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Okay. So we're done. Oh, wow, we're done a little bit early. So I'm going to stay until 9:30 or until 8:30, I guess, Lambda time, to answer any questions or to help you guys with anything you need. But for those of you that feel pretty good about everything that we've done, I just want to review the learning objectives for today. Okay, so number 1, you should be able to use a timer to do something at a specified time in the future. Okay, so I know we used this countdown object, but if you think back to like the timer.schedule timer with, repeating duration and then the block of code that we want to run, that's how we set up a timer. Okay, Number 2, you should be able to use a UIPickerView to allow a user to select from a list of items. Okay, so we talked about setting ourselves as the delegate and the data source for the picker view, and then implementing those data source and delegate methods. Okay, and then you should be able to create and present a UI alert controller, which is what we did at the very beginning, just that easy. Create the alert, create the actions, add the actions, present the alert. Okay. All right. So for those of you who are feeling good about everything, you're welcome to get started on your homework, and we'll plan on seeing you on Wednesday. But then the rest of the time is yours, guys, to ask me any questions or to get clarity on anything.
Hey, Johnny, could you go up to the actions, the IB actions? Just want to see something I might have missed.
Hey, Johnny.
Yeah.
So when I was watching the video from Spencer from his class, and then one of the students pointed out like the countdown Swift, they considered that the model, because I'm still trying to like understand the model view controllers and how to kind of organize that stuff. Would that be put as the model? Would you constitute that as the model or the object? Would that be the countdown?
I'd consider it more of a controller if we're talking about MVC, because usually models are usually like blueprints of the type of objects that you're working with. But like, I mean, in the sense, the countdown is sort of a model and a controller, but yeah, it's a controller because it's like functionally like acting as like it's informing the UI, like here's what's happening between this model object and like the views, right? It's sort of coordinating like when the timer is running, when the timer is finished and whatnot. So in that sense, it's sort of a model and a controller. It's kind of a mix of both, but.
Good to go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Johnny, can I peek at line 60?
Yes.
So Johnny, going back to I guess delegates in an app that we're gonna have like say multiple view controllers, would we then create a separate delegate specifically for what we're doing? Because I know we're kind of putting everything in one I guess controller, but would we create like a separate delegate for this? Like a protocol?
So it just depends on how you need the view controllers to pass information to each other. So yeah, so if you're trying to pass information from one view controller to another, you would probably need to use a delegate to like pass that information through. But not every view controller is necessarily like needed to be interconnected that way. You know, like just a normal like master detail view doesn't require any sort of delegate, right? Because you can just use the prepare for segue. That's like when you tap on this, present this detail view with this object, right? That doesn't require a delegate. So it really just it depends on like how your view controllers are interacting with each other, and how your model controllers are interacting with each other. But the idea is that you sort of want to separate functionality into like this MVC architecture, whereas like the countdown object is the thing that actually like manages the timer. And so instead of like the view controller having its own timer, it needs to be connected to that countdown object via a delegate so that the countdown object can communicate to the view controller, hey, the timer's been updated, or hey, the timer is finished. But yeah, you only need delegates if you're trying to establish some sort of relationship between two objects that need to share information.
Gotcha. Okay, then that makes sense. All right, Johnny. Well, thank you. You have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Can I see the last method that we did? The for the picker view.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, thank you. All right, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Is it easier to do? I mean, I noticed that you typed the code in for setting the corner radius for the buttons. Is it easier to do that via code, or is it easier to jump into the layout, the storyboard, and make the changes there, or does it kind of depend on the case?
So I actually prefer setting it in code because the only way to set the corner radius for a button in the storyboard is you have to go to the identity inspector, and the corner radius is a runtime attribute. So inside of the identity inspector, there's these user-defined runtime attributes. So you actually have to set the key path like layer.corner radius and change the type here to be like a number and set that. Like, it's just, I never remember any, like, it's a lot easier because autocomplete works in program, like when you do it programmatically, whereas these key path things, like you have to remember every time like what the runtime attribute is called. So yeah, so I much prefer to do it in code.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I can see certainly you're not going to be familiar with every drop down that you need to find on there. So
yeah, so programmatically is definitely easier. I don't know why Apple doesn't just allow buttons to be like the corner radius to be configurable in the attribute inspector. It sort of baffles me that that's not like a thing. It's the same thing with like giving a button an outline. Like that's also another thing that you have to set programmatically or with the runtime attributes, but it's just like, come on, like buttons, you always want a rounded button and you pretty much always want a button to have some sort of border. Like it's weird that they don't allow you to just configure that in the attribute inspector, but maybe one day.
Yeah, I was gonna say that might be the next release, and then we'll have to learn all this over again.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, thanks, Johnny.
Yep.
Can you go to your duration property?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
Okay, did you get it figured out, Bowden?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, guys, anything else? All right, well, if there's nothing else, then we'll plan on seeing the rest of you on Wednesday. Good luck on your homework, and we'll see you then.